Story number 1, Waking the Witch. I don't believe in coincidence anymore. What happened that night in Salem, it wasn't just bad luck. It wasn't a prank or some freak accident. No, it was something older, something that had been waiting for us. I never wanted to go to Salem. You've heard the stories, right? The witch trials, the history of pain, of suffering, of innocent lives taken. But that weekend, my friends and I thought it would be fun to get away, to escape the noise of the city. We never thought the darkness we'd find in those woods would follow us back. We'd been hiking for hours. The air was thick, damp from the mist rolling in off the forest. The sun was setting behind us, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. That's when we saw it. An old house, hidden deep in the woods, tucked away like it didn't want to be found. It was a small house, run down, crumbling. The door was open, the windows dark and boarded up. But there was something about it, something pulling us in. I felt it first, a heaviness in the air, like the house was watching us, waiting for us to step inside. Sarah, the bravest of us, didn't hesitate. It's just an old house. Who knows? Maybe it's a piece of history. But that's the thing about history. It's never as distant as we think. Inside, the air was freezing. I could see my breath in the dark. Everything was covered in dust, broken furniture, shattered mirrors, but it was the painting that caught my eye. Hanging in the far corner of the room, a portrait of a woman. Her face, it didn't just stare, it watched. Her eyes, they were dark, hollow, but they moved, shifting with every step we took. I couldn't look away. My stomach turned. It was like she knew we were there, like she was waiting. Mark tried to lighten the mood. Maybe she's just a lady who really liked her portrait. He laughed, but I could barely hear it over the pounding in my chest. The woman in the painting was dressed in old, colonial clothes, fitting for Salem, but there was something off about her expression. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't even human. The way her eyes glinted, it was as if she were alive. And in the shadows, something else was moving. Then we noticed the symbols on the floor. Old runes carved into the wood, some of them smeared with something dark. Blood, or something worse, and they led upstairs. I wanted to leave then, but Sarah, of course, had to keep going. "I'm going up. You coming?" she called over her shoulder. I stood frozen, unable to speak, but my feet moved on their own, and that's when I felt it. A cold breath on my neck, a whisper in my ear, just barely audible.
"Leave now."
But I didn't. We all went upstairs. The room at the top was worse. It was covered in old, rotting rugs with those same dark symbols. The air was suffocating, and in the center of the room, an altar. It was stained red, and the candles around it flickered with an unnatural light. And then, the worst part, a journal lying open on the altar. The pages were yellowed and stained with old telling the story of a woman accused of witchcraft during the trials. Her name was Isabel Hawthorne, an innocent woman condemned to die for crimes she never committed. The book spoke of her final words before the hanging. "I will return. You cannot burn away my soul. I will rise from the ashes, and I will make you suffer." Suddenly the air grew colder, and a voice hissed,
"You've disturbed me. You should have stayed away."
It was her, the woman from the portrait. She stepped out of the shadows, her skin pale and stretched tight over her bones, her face hollowed with centuries of rage. Her eyes, those eyes, glowed like embers in the dark, and her smile. It wasn't a smile at all. It was a grimace, a twisted mockery of something human.
"You should not have come."
Before we could even react, She was on Sarah. Her hands, thin and bony, wrapped around Sarah's neck with the speed of a snake, twisting, choking, snapping. I heard a sickening crack as Sarah's body went limp in her grasp. Panic set in. Mark and I tried to run, but the door wouldn't open. We pulled at it, screaming, but the house, it wouldn't let us leave.
You should have stayed out. Now you'll join me forever.
Then, in a moment of desperation, the door finally opened. We ran. No, we fled into the dark forest, into the cold night. We didn't stop, not even when the pain in our lungs felt like fire. I thought I could hear her following us, hear her laugh echoing in the wind. But when we made it back to the road, we dared to look behind us. The house, it was gone. Nothing but trees and shadows where it once stood. I went back to Salem a week later, hoping to make sense of it all. But when I tried to find the house again, it was as if it had vanished from existence. The trees were just trees, the woods, just woods. But I know it was real, and I know we weren't the first to wake her. If you ever find yourself in Salem, be careful. Not all the spirits there rest in peace. Some of them are waiting. Story number 2, The Name That Haunts. We thought it was just another night. A few friends gathered around the fire, trading stories like we always did. But something about that night, something shifted. That's when we learned there are stories you don't tell, and some things you never call. It started with Sarah. She was always quiet, the kind of person who only spoke when she had something important to say. We never thought much of it until she told us about the ritual. We were laughing, just the usual banter. But Sarah wasn't laughing. Her voice dropped low, like she was reciting something ancient, not like her at all. She spoke of a creature, something old, buried deep in the woods. A thing that could only be summoned by speaking its name 3 times. At first, we thought she was messing with us, but Sarah didn't joke like that. Her eyes were locked on the flames, her voice steady, but there was something in it, something cold. She said it wasn't just a story, it was a warning that once you spoke its name, it became real, that it was always there, lurking beneath the soil, waiting for someone foolish enough to call it. We laughed. It sounded ridiculous. But then, she spoke its name. I remember the exact moment. The air shifted, the fire flickered, and the temperature dropped. We all stopped laughing. Something was off. The woods went quiet. Then we heard it. At first, I thought it was just a bear, but the growl, it wasn't right. It was deeper, more primal. I turned to Sarah, but she was still staring into the fire, her face pale, like she knew this was coming. That's when we heard it again. A whisper.
You called me.
Soft, almost like the wind, but it wasn't the wind. I swear to you, I heard it. It came from the trees behind us. I whipped around expecting someone to be playing a prank, but there was nothing. The woods were still, dead quiet. And then, Sarah smiled. She didn't speak, but her eyes, there was something in them, something dark. It was like she was waiting for us to understand. But I didn't want to understand. I wanted to run. We should have left then. But we stayed. The night felt wrong, like the air itself had turned heavy. And then we heard it. The ground began to shake, a low rumble beneath our feet. It wasn't thunder. It was something closer. I tried to move, but it was like the earth was holding me down. I could feel it moving beneath us, like something massive slithering through the dirt, the very ground alive with it. That's when we scattered. We ran in different directions, all of us terrified. But no matter how fast we ran, the creature was faster. We could hear it behind us, the scraping, the growl. Closer, always closer. I thought I was going to make it. I was almost out of the woods. But then, something grabbed my leg. It wasn't human. It was cold, impossibly cold, like ice. I screamed. The ground cracked open beneath me, pulling me down into darkness. My body was dragged, skin scraped raw against the earth. There was something wet, something alive. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. Its claws, sharp as thorns, raking against me. And I knew. It was waiting for me. The last thing I remember is a cold breath against my face, like it was tasting me. Then, nothing. I don't know how long I was gone. I woke up to the fire long extinguished. The others, they were gone. And Sarah, she was gone too. But I can't help but wonder, was she always part of it? Was she a pawn? Or had she been waiting for this moment all along? I don't know. But that growl, that whisper, I know it wasn't just a story. And now, it's waiting for you. I've tried to leave. I thought if I left it would go away. But it's still here. I hear the whispers. I feel it watching me. It's never left. I'm telling you this because I know you're curious. You think it's just a story. You think you can say its name without consequence. But you can't. Once you call it, it's real. It's part of you now. Don't say its name. Don't tell the story. It's real. And it's listening. It's always listening. And it's always hungry.
You called me.
Story number 3. The Skinwalker of Colorado. Have you ever had a feeling that something was just wrong, but you couldn't put your finger on it? That nagging sense of dread, even when everything seems normal. That's how we felt that night in Colorado. I wish, more than anything, we had trusted our instincts. It was supposed to be a relaxing weekend away. 4 friends, 2 couples. A quiet escape into the Colorado wilderness where the only distractions were the sound of our laughter and the crackling of the campfire. We hiked, joked, cooked s'mores, and just enjoyed being out there, away from everything. No phones, no obligations, just the stars and the trees. Around midnight, we were sitting around the fire, reminiscing about old times, when we heard it. A rustling, faint at first, like the wind moving through the trees, then a deep growl. Did you hear that? Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We all froze. The growl came again, louder this time and closer. Probably just a bear or a mountain lion, Mark said, trying to sound confident, though his eyes darted nervously toward the dark woods. Stay here. I'll go check it out. Are you sure? Olivia asked, gripping his arm. Mark gave a reassuring nod and grabbed his flashlight. I'll be fine. Just stay by the fire. We watched as the beam of his flashlight wavered and disappeared into the trees. The rustling grew quieter, and then all was still. We sat there in silence, the fire casting flickering shadows, the growl still lingering in the back of our minds. Minutes passed, then an hour. No sign of Mark. I don't like this, Olivia muttered, her voice trembling. Something's wrong. I'll go check on him, I said, standing up, dread twisting in my gut. Before I could take a step, we heard it. Mark's voice, faint but clear. I'm fine. Don't worry. I'll be right back. Relief washed over us. See? He's fine, Emily said, her shoulders relaxing as she sank back down. A few minutes later, Mark emerged from the shadows. At first it seemed normal, but as he stepped into the firelight, something was off. His clothes were untouched, his flashlight still in hand. There was an unsettling stillness about him, as though he wasn't fully there. Mark? I asked, stepping toward him. What happened? Are you okay? He looked at me, offering a smile that was too quick, too wide. His eyes weren't quite focused, like he was staring through me rather than at me. Nothing, he said, his voice flat and monotone. Just got turned around. I'm fine. Olivia frowned. You don't look fine. You look tired, Mark interrupted, his smile faltering slightly. It's been a long walk. I'm going to bed. Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked to his tent. The suddenness of it left us speechless. We stared at the fire, the tension thick in the air. I don't know, Emily muttered. There was just something about him. He didn't seem right. Olivia nodded slowly. His eyes, they were too wide, like he wasn't seeing us. But through us, a chill ran down my spine. We didn't say anything more, but the unease lingered. The fire crackled, the trees cast long shadows, and the forest felt alive, like it was watching us. A sudden noise snapped me out of my thoughts. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from Mark's tent. I turned, expecting to see him, but my breath caught in my throat. Mark was walking toward the fire, but it wasn't Mark. His movements were jerky, stiff, like a puppet on strings. His grin stretched too wide, and his unblinking eyes reflected the firelight unnaturally. Mark? I called out, my voice trembling. What's going on? He didn't answer. He just kept coming, his steps unnervingly precise. And then, without warning, he lunged. It happened so fast. One moment he was several feet away. The next, he was on Emily. His hands, no, claws, dug into her shoulders with inhuman strength. Her scream pierced the night, raw and desperate as she thrashed against him. Blood sprayed across the dirt as he yanked her into the darkness. Run, Olivia screamed, grabbing my arm. I didn't need to be told twice. My legs burned, my lungs screamed, but I didn't stop. The forest blurred around me, twisted shapes reaching out like shadowy hands. Olivia was right behind me. I could hear her frantic breaths, her footsteps pounding the earth. But then, a guttural growl erupted behind us. Olivia's scream tore through the night as she was dragged back into the shadows. I turned, just for a moment, to see her being pulled into the darkness, her face contorted in terror. Then she was gone. Tears streamed down my face as I kept running. I didn't look back again. When I finally broke through the tree line onto the dirt road, I collapsed, gasping for breath. Headlights appeared in the distance, and a car skidded to a stop. A middle-aged man jumped out, his eyes wide. Please, I choked out. Something's in the woods. My friends. He didn't ask questions. He helped me into the car and sped off, his face pale as I stammered out the story. He didn't believe me, I could tell, but he didn't argue. The police arrived within the hour. Flashing lights painted the forest in eerie reds and blues. I told them everything, but their faces shifted from concern to skepticism as I spoke. When they searched the campsite, they found claw marks and destruction, no bodies. They called it a bear attack, but I knew better. Weeks passed. I returned home, but I was never the same. At night, I'd catch glimpses of movement outside my window, shadows stretching unnaturally. And then one night, I heard it again. That same low growl. My blood turned to ice as I turned toward the sound. A shadow in the corner of my living room shifted, too tall and too thin. And then I heard his voice. I'm fine. Don't worry. I'll be right back. You can run, but you can't escape the skinwalker. Thank you for joining us tonight. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you stay up to date on all our latest spooky stories. If you got a good scare, be sure to like the video and share it with your friends if you think they can handle it. And don't forget to leave us a comment telling us which story left you looking over your shoulder.